everybody. Welcome to the Sutton Vesey Ward Forum on Thursday, the 18th of February 2021. Today's meeting is slightly different to our previous ones in that it is now more interactive for residents. So a bit of housekeeping for you all. If you look at the screen at the very top, you'll see a smiley face with a little hand. If you wish to speak or you have a comment you wish to make, click on the hand and that icon will appear next to your name, and we will be able to then call you in at the appropriate time so you can ask your question or make your comment. Next to that, there's a small tab which is the conversation, which can go ahead between yourselves, and then left of that again is a list of all the participants. So some of you will be presenting some bits and pieces on today's agenda, and we'll call you in at the appropriate time. So if that's all clear, we'll get on to the agenda. So welcome to the Vesey Ward Forum meeting, and it is up to me to tell you that this meeting will be recorded for live and subsequent broadcasting and will be kept in perpetuity on the council website and can be viewed by anyone at any time via the YouTube connections there. Item 3 now, we go on to the coronavirus public update. It was Justin Varney, but I think we have one of them. We now have
Marion Gibbon.
Marion
who's going to present this item.
Is Marion here?
I hope she's here.
I don't think Marion's joined just yet.
Have we not?
I can't see her in the list.
We hope to have her with us in a minute. Just on the housekeeping rules, by the way, if you put a comment in the chat, then apparently this is available for anyone to see the moment you write it. So don't make a private comment that you wouldn't want anyone else to see in the chat, because you're broadcasting it to anyone who happens to be viewing.
We still have quite a few people joining. Should we just give it another couple of minutes?
True, yeah, let's just have a bit of a pause for a couple of minutes. We'll see who comes in and then we'll pick it up from there.
Yeah. Hello, Tony Willis. It's good to see you. Nice wave. It's been a while since we've seen you face to face.
Yep.
You well?
Very well, thanks.
Good. Good. Coming thick and fast, aren't they, all our new guests? Welcome, everybody. So for those of you that didn't hear the initial comments that I made regarding housekeeping, if you look at the top of your screen, there's a little icon with a smiley face. If you wish to speak, click on that icon, and at the appropriate moment we'll bring you in to speak, ask a question, make your comments. But in the meantime, in order for the meeting to run smoothly and to make sure that the bandwidth at the City Council isn't completely tied up, we need to all remember to turn our cameras off and mute our microphones, because we get a lot of echo and feedback and we want it to be as clear as possible for everybody. Thank you, guys. So, Rob, this is quite a new experience, being able to see all our residents for a change. It's been a long time since we've been able to see anybody, so it's feels a bit churlish to tell people to turn their cameras off.
I really like to see people, live human beings. Gone are the days when we used to have these meetings in the Carpenters Arms, although, as we're hoping to hear from Father Morris at item 7, we are looking forward to reviving the public meetings in the Carpenters Arms as soon as we're able to do it.
Yeah, indeed. So we've got quite a few people here, but the person that we want on the agenda right now hasn't. So perhaps we should jig the agenda around a little bit, Rob.
Shall we start on the Commonwealth Games, which was the next item? Commonwealth Games and the improvements to Sutton Park.
Okay, over to you then.
Yeah, I think I'll pick up a couple of points on there. We did hope to have the parks manager, John Porter, at this meeting. He's unfortunately had a family bereavement. His father passed away a couple of days ago, so quite understandably he's preoccupied with family affairs tonight. So he sent his apologies. But I just wanted to highlight 3 items which he and a couple of the other officers from the Park Service have mentioned to us about this item on the agenda. The first is just to remind everybody that there is an application now being considered by the planning department of the council to make a substantial improvement to the car parking area at the Boldmere Gate. This expands the numbers of car parking places at the Boldmere Gate car park entrance by something like 90 or 100 spaces, but more importantly, it provides a proper hard standing, a surface called EcoTurf, which is kind of green and environmentally acceptable and porous. I think we have a resident who probably knows something about how that works for the benefit of the drainage of water off the land in Sutton Park. And obviously the other thing is there are dedicated places for the disabled parking. I think 5 spots on the hard standing, 5 on the EcoTurf, which will fulfill one of Kath's big ambitions, which is to improve the accessibility of Sutton Park and to make Sutton Park the most accessible city park in the country. That's an ambition, and this new scheme will help to bring that about. There is a planning application which is closing date, I think, is next week. There's a petition supporting these proposals, which Kath and I are both encouraging residents to sign if they will. I think we're on 462 signatures at the moment.
So.
It would be great to get it to 500 before it gets submitted next Tuesday, I think it is, to both the City Council and the Town Council to back that up. So that's it on the car parking. The second item that was drawn to my attention is questions about what's going on with landscape management at Sutton Park. There's some tree felling going on, birch trees coming out. Why is this happening? People ask. So I think it would be helpful just to remind people as to what is being done to bring Sutton Park under a new landscape management programme. And this is basically to restore the way the park is managed to what they call a managed medieval landscape. Greetings, Marion. I've just seen you have arrived. We've jumped a step ahead of you, so we're on Sutton Park if you're prepared to just sit with us on this one for 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll bring you in. Back onto Sutton Park. So basically, Sutton Park, as it was originally developed in the medieval period, was a managed parkland landscape. It's actually a working landscape, and essentially it's full of trees which were coppiced or felled for logging and that could be used for building. And it's a heathland, which was cropped by cattle, rabbits, other wildlife, and therefore was naturally managed both as heathland on the one side and as coppiced woodland, managed woodland on the other. Basically, over the last 100 years, that kind of land management has fallen apart, and the trees have overgrown in the woodlands, and the heathlands have overgrown in the heathland area. What the parks management plan now is, and it's a 50-year plan actually, to steadily restore the park to a sustainable way of managing it according to its medieval land management approach. So slowly, the overgrown woodlands, particularly the Hollywoods, are coming out and will be allowed to regrow, and then they will be coppiced as they would have been in the old days. Every 10 or 20 years, the holly growth is cut and can be used for fencing, palings, will be practically used. Some of the holly can be used, as well as the woodland that's felled, as a biofuel, so it's reused. So we do have a land management policy there. That's why the hollywoods are slowly coming out and will be actually allowed to regrow, but in a managed way. And on the heathlands, same thing. The birch trees grow naturally on the heathlands. If they're not cropped, they will grow and birch woods will develop. So what they're having to do now is to take out the mature stands of birch trees and allow small birch trees to regrow, and those will be cropped. They will be fodder for the cattle and the wildlife grazing in the park, so it becomes a natural ecosystem managed by the wildlife and therefore retaining its kind of status as a stable heathland area. So you have the woodlands back to coppicing and the heathlands back to grazing, and that will then ideally be carrying on in perpetuity. So we have a land management policy for Sutton Park. So when you're seeing stuff ripped out, don't think the council is tearing your park to bits. It's actually restoring it to the natural way in which it would have been managed over many centuries. And the last 100 years of neglect, where things were allowed to just grow out of hand, are being replaced now by a long-term management plan. This has been agreed by Natural England, Environment Agency, the bodies that assess SSIs, Sites of Special Scientific Interest, and the National Nature Reserve, which is obviously the policies that keep Sutton Park properly balanced environmentally. So that's basically explaining why bits of felling are going on. It's not a desecration of our park by any manner of means. It's actually a positive way to restore it into the kind of management that it should have been held under in years gone by. And the last thing I wanted to say about Sutton Park and the site at Boldmere Gate, which is going to be used for the triathlon in the Commonwealth Games, the money that's paying for the car park restoration is funded not from the City Council actually, but from the Commonwealth Games Fund, which is largely a government fund with businesses and others contributing to it. So that's one part of the benefits our area is going to get off the Commonwealth Games. But I just wanted to highlight a further scheme which is coming as part of the Commonwealth Games promotion, and that is what's been called a communities small grants funding scheme. Kath and I, as ward councillors, have overseeing a new grant programme. Something like £22,000 will be available for community groups to bid into. We'll be starting this process fairly soon, but if you're on this call and interested in setting up a celebration of the Commonwealth Games, the Commonwealth in any way, you can have a Getting Active programme, a community projects to ensure that we're all games ready, kind of keep fit and that stuff, and also celebrating cultures, where obviously all the different cultures of the Commonwealth, including Britain and other Commonwealth nations, can have a big old knees up and celebrating the great things about our cultures, food, identity, clothing, style, fashion, whatever it is, just celebrating the different cultures and bringing people together. So any scheme, plot, plan, idea that you might have, we'll be looking at how to fund those. And whilst finishing on that point, I know we've got John Mole, City Council Officer from the Neighbourhood Development Unit, on this call. So I wondered if John, you haven't been prompted on this, but I'm jumping in on it because I know you can speak off the cuff. Have you got 30 seconds just to add any more detail about how the grant regime is going to be administered? You can see how fed up he is looking because I've just called him in.
Sorry, John.
No, my apologies. I had the Oxford vaccine yesterday and it's left me with a hangover without the joys of any alcohol.
Oh, yeah, we were speculating whether the vaccine had been encouraged with alcohol or just replaced the alcohol.
I wouldn't recommend taking alcohol with it because I've had a hangover all day and I'm still trying to shake it. Plus the fact I wasn't expecting to be talking, hence the dodgy T-shirt. I'm meeting with the Commonwealth. Anyway. I'm meeting with the Commonwealth team on Tuesday, councillors, to discuss the exact protocol of where we go. There's certainly, as you know, a guidance that's already come out now to look at how we're actually going to start to allocate some of the funding. and some of the ward allocation that comes with it. I think it would be a bit too quick of me to actually give any further information on that, but to just assure you that if it's coming via the neighbourhood development unit and your good self here, I will make certain you're in the processes from day one. Right, forgive me, I'm going to go back and nurse my hangover.
That's what we like to hear. Thanks, John, for chipping in on that one. We'd just like to give you a bit of a profile for today.
And in the meantime, anyone who's interested, just email us with simple, quick message saying, I'm interested in Commonwealth Games funding, and we'll gather a list of people together to put a project in place to support that and get things delivered to the community.
I think building on that, Councillor, it's absolutely essential that our community groups have an involvement in it. That's been a prerequisite from day one with that. Yeah. Your ward is in a fantastic position to do that. You've got one of the most active and keen residents I know.
Very proud of them. We are too. Yeah.
Well, we want to put on a good show, so the offer is out there. Any sparky ideas to celebrate the Commonwealth and the Games in any shape or form, put your heads together, throw in ideas, and we'll come back to you with the process of how to take those ideas forward for funding. I think the last thing, actually, just on the issue of the Games, there are people interested in volunteering for the Games, and I've just noticed on the note that they've sent us is that the scheme for volunteering is about to be launched in the next few weeks. So that I know a lot of young people in our Sutton Vesey Ward were interested in helping out in this, so hold tight and you should get some instructions coming over the next few weeks as to how that's going to work. Just before we move on to the public health update, do we have, before we go there, Marion, do we have any questions or comments from any of the audience? You are now able to put your hand up and comment. Well, actually, Marion's got her hand up. Did you want to comment on this item?
Yes, I did, because I think it's really fantastic, and it relates from what you were telling us about the regeneration of our parkland as well, in terms of getting active and the whole focus on how we can improve our activity levels and get healthier too. And so there's public health knowledge and intelligence that we have available to be able to support some of those projects, in terms of if you want to come to us in our knowledge and intelligence team, we are able to support with data as well. So just to let you know on that. So
I will take you up on that for sure.
Absolutely. That's a double benefit of having a public health officer present in this meeting, that not only can talk about viruses and vaccines, but you can talk about healthy parks. I don't see anybody in the chat or putting a hand up, but if anybody does want to ask a question about the park, and I know, Becky, you're on the call here. Do you want to add anything that you might want to about the Sutton Park proposals? Becky is secretary to this fantastic group we've got now, the Friends of the Gates, of Boldmere Gate and Banners Gate. And Becky is the what should we say, the live wire at the centre of that group, along with Oliver. So did you want to add anything, Becky, to what I've just said? I have inspected the ground drainage part of this scheme, by the way. I'm very impressed. Go on, Becky.
Thanks very much, Rob. Obviously, Friends of the Gate, as a friend of the Gate and a founding member of the group, we're really delighted to see that the car parking area is going to be massively improved. As anyone who's been there in the rain knows, it's a bit of a muddy quagmire with puddles you could lose a child in. So to see those improvements happening and that investment in our community is absolutely fantastic. But Friends of the Gate are ambitious, and we would really like to work with the council and stakeholders in the area to look at improving the facilities for everyone to use. So we very much support things like having public toilets again, perhaps attached to a cafe, and also to look at hosting more events on within the park and supporting more activities. You know, during lockdown, we've all appreciated what an absolutely amazing resource we have on our doorstep. I think all of us have seen more of the park in the last year than perhaps in the last decade. And, you know, if anyone wants to come and join Friends of the Gates, we're really keen to have new members. We actually have a meeting early next week. So if you pass on your contact details to Rob, he'll pass them on to ourselves, and we'd love you to come and join us in our Zoom meeting. So that's all for me. But yeah, the car park, it's amazing what a big difference that will make. And also not just people using the park, but during the bank holidays, with so many people using the park, the car parks got a bit crowded, and there was some slightly dodgy on-street parking in the area that was causing a bit of traffic chaos. So actually increasing the provision of parking, I think, will really benefit people around Monmouth Drive and Stonehouse Lane, because they did suffer a little bit. And again, if we can get parking right, it just makes it a lot easier to make that space more of a community asset and resource for more people to enjoy.
Indeed.
Brilliant. And I can encourage anybody who wants to get involved in Becky's group. You can be guaranteed good entertainment as well as making a positive impact in our area. Now, I've seen two hands. Jane Bennett has hand up. Jane, I think you're active in Eco Sutton. Do you want to add a comment here?
You can unmute and put your camera on. That would be, I think, would be great.
This is all experimenting, Jane. So if you can get in, well done.
There we go.
Yay!
You just need to unmute now, Jane.
Hey.
There you go. We've got you.
I wondered what that was for.
Welcome. It's nice to see you.
Thank you. There'll be is it 100 or so extra spaces, did you say, in the new car park?
Yeah.
It's just at the moment, obviously the park's very busy, and I guess, you know, that will continue after the COVID settles down a bit more, but probably not so much so. But it is quite dangerous, I think, for pedestrians. I noticed today, children, you know, obviously it's half term, cyclists, runners, because the cars are still coming into the park past Boldmere Gate. And I did wonder, because of the extra capacity in the new car park, whether there may be a consultation in the future to possibly restrict cars going any further past, you know, the gates there, and to allow, you know, a better environment for all these other people who, you know, because they can park their car in the main car park and walk through the park or whatever.
Well, back immediately on that point, Jane, you're spot on, actually. And if you bury your way into the detailed document, the design guide on page 21, you'll see that there are historical proposals, actually, to try to encourage parking on the periphery of the park, as opposed to people just kind of driving off the road on any little bit of land as you go into the park. This is not a good thing to do, not just because we're taking cars through what ought to be a clean environment, but also, of course, it's potentially damaging the sites of special scientific interest to people kind of just drive over bits of grassland. So the scheme, which creates capacity at the gates, does go along with a scheme to try and reduce the amount of car pressure on the inner part of the park, which will make it quieter and safer. And obviously, to connect the two, we need better walkways. You need not to be wading through mud. So there's quite a number of steps to go through to achieve this end point. But this is all part of a process of trying to manage the park better and to get people parking where they are better to park, walking where they'd be better to walk, and making it environmentally more sound along the way. So
and
hopefully that will
for
be
the whole community
as well. For the community,
yeah.
Hopefully that will produce a positive result. Yogesh has his hand up. I know that Yogesh is an active runner, often noted to be running down Monmouth Drive, I think.
Has Yogesh put a question in the chat? And then we've got Satnam.
Satnam's hand is up, and Satnam and I had a conversation about this parking business on email.
Satnam could come up.
Do you want to? Satnam can come up. Just let me answer Yogesh's question in the chat, which is about the funding. John Moult might know the detail here, but my understanding is there are sort of 3 levels of funding: one up to 500 quid, 500 to 5,000, I think thereabouts, and then 5,000 to 10,000. Obviously, we've got a limit on the budget, so we can't blow it all on one big project. But there is a spectrum of funding that is permissible when you put your applications in. But anyone interested, have a chat to the officers of the council once the scheme is underway. John is likely to be the one, and then we can start to build the plans together. Now, Satnam is a close resident to the park, and we and I have had a number of conversations about a lot of things actually over the years, including railings and goodness knows what, dumping and missed dustbins actually. But Satnam, do you want to add any more to that discussion about the car parking and the issues that I picked up this afternoon?
Okay, thanks, Rob. I mean, I'd just like to add, obviously, you've addressed it. Obviously, the front end car parking capacity is being increased, but there's actually going to be a net decrease in overall capacity. I mean, today there's something like over 300 cars in those car parks, right? And the proposed car parking is only 200. So where do the other, even post COVID, we're probably going to get around about 200 plus cars there on most times. We're not going to go back to pre-COVID levels, and that is going to put pressure on the surrounding roads. I mean, a Stonehouse Road is already chock-a-block, on most weekends now.
Yeah, I was obviously support your point, and I know we've been dealing with this issue of parking, and you're highly exposed to that. What I suggest we do here, I haven't got the detail for the whole of Sutton Park. We're just dealing here with literally the Boldmere Gate bit. But what, as I said in an email a little earlier, what I think we should do is to get John Porter to come back and remind everybody of the comprehensive car parking plans for the whole of Sutton Park. I think there are 22 locations.
Yeah, there were lots of detail about all the different gates and the access and the types and size of the parking capacity in all those different areas as well. So I think he needs to, when he's available, come back and clarify the exact numbers for you.
And also, I think if we did that on the line that we don't currently know where the position lies with the proposals to introduce a charge with car parking. There is no proposal at the moment to do that, but the City Council do have an overall policy of charging people to park in a council park in the larger parks of the city. A number of these are going in. Sutton Parks has been suspended for now because the finances didn't quite seem to stack up, but I guess that will come back. And your point, Satnam, I think about what would happen in the event of these new car parking arrangements being brought about. How do you avoid the streets being lined with cars because they can't get in the park? It's a good question, and I think let's get John Porter and his colleagues to come back to us and update us on where they've got with that at a future meeting.
Okay, thanks.
I think, is that all? Was there another question in the chat? Oh, speed bumps at Boldmere Gate, says Alistair. And beyond into the park would be great. Yes, it's interesting. There is a 5 mile an hour limit supposedly required in Sutton Park. It's not enforceable actually because the highway laws don't apply in Sutton Park. And I've often said to people when they moan about the state of the roads, which are full of potholes, it's a secret way to keep the traffic speeds down to 5 miles an hour. It's a slightly flippant comment, but you're right that the big problem and James made the point, cars kind of running around inside the park are not a good thing. The comment about, I'm just picking the chat up again. Oh, Jeff, yes. Speed bumps were built and then removed. I think there have been bumps removed. There is a sort of flattened bump if you go up the area near to Brass House area. There's a number that are there are a number that have gone, a number that have decayed, shall we say. So I think the whole point about this discussion is that we need to get back to a long-term plan for how many cars really we want to have going inside the park, how they drive safely through the park, how the roads are prepared into such a condition to cope with the traffic, and what we do if the people start piling up in residential roads around the park because they can't get in. It's a big long-term issue that needs sorting out. So I think we need both John and maybe a highways officer to come and talk to us about that on another occasion. If there's nothing else in the chat, thanks for all those comments. We'll obviously keep coming back to Sutton Park. A lot of work going on. Glad to see some money going in. Unanswered questions still need answering. But let's go back, actually. Now we have Dr. Marion Gibbon with us. She's billed to talk to us about the coronavirus public health update. I'm sure members of the ward are keen to hear what's going on with the infection rates, what's going on with vaccinations, and when are we going to have a chance to get out a bit more. Marion, do you want to take us through? Have you got a presentation, or are you just going to talk us?
Oh no, I've just got a bit of a short briefing. So I've got that on my laptop, and I'm talking on my iPad. So you'll be pleased to know we've finally got some better news in terms of our case rate is finally coming down. So it's still pretty high, but it's not as bad as it was. So it's at 215 cases per 100,000 now, compared to just over a week ago. It was over 100 more than that. So it was at 300. So that's really good. And our case rate has also decreased from the previous week, and we're now 16th highest in England rather than being one of the worst. So that's definitely an improvement. The spread is still taking place primarily through our households and social interactions. So there's still a lot needs to be to keep going with all of that. And the hospital admissions are finally beginning to come down. And we've got between 47 and 78 new cases a day, which is better than it has been for some time. In terms of where we are amongst our West Midland local authorities, we are no longer Sandwell is probably Sandwell and Walsall still remain the top of the table, and we're beginning to come down, which is, as I was saying, is really good news. Now for Sutton Vesey Ward itself, we're 26 out of the 69 wards for the number of cases, where the first is the highest and 69th is the lowest, with 32 reported cases. And the case rate is 1.63 cases per 100,000 population, and the rate for Birmingham at the moment is 1.93. So so Sutton Vesey is doing okay. In terms of where the problems are arising at the moment, it's predominantly 12% in the 0 to 19s, 31 in the 20 to 39 age group, and 33% in the 40 to 59 age group. So but it's getting to be lower amongst the over 80s, which is very good news. Predominantly the problems are within the white ethnic group within your wards, and yes, so 69% of the cases in Sutton Vesey are in the white population. So and in terms of where we're getting on, how we're getting on with the COVID marshals, we would really like to see some more in your wards. So if you can spread the word and get information out, because the people who are part of those COVID champions get the latest up-to-date information about what's going on in terms of the rates and everything. I think Councillor Hamilton mentioned to me that nearly all the councillors are now have signed up as champions, which is great for us, and we'd love some more as well. So if you can keep that going, that would be fantastic.
Just being clear on that point, Marion, we're talking here COVID champions, not COVID marshals.
Yes, this is a COVID champion.
Yeah, so this is people. Just give us 30 seconds on what a COVID champion can do.
Okay. So what the COVID champions do is making sure that people have the correct information about things, so that they can counter some of the false narratives that are going on, give people information about the vaccination programme, what lateral flow testing is, and all of those sorts of things, and where you can go to get tested and so forth. So it's really an information giving, and you get the latest information in terms of public health data, graphs and things, and what's happening. All of that information is given to you if you sign up. So that's
brilliant.
And
okay.
Yes, and so we've got 15 in the ward now, and it would be great to have some more.
There we go. There's a call out to anyone who can help out. It's be very helpful work. Did you have more to say, Marion?
No, that's basically what I had to say at the moment. So some better news than we've had before.
At our scrutiny committee, I tempted Dr. Varney to speculate on the stages of the unlock. I wonder if you're prepared to say anything on that.
Oh, I know you did. And I am in a similar position. I think we're going to have to be watchful, see what happens, and I think I'm of a similar opinion to Dr. Varney on it. We need to kind of take it slowly. It's not going to be overnight, and that we still need to continue to make sure we distance, wash our hands, and wear our face coverings to keep everyone safe.
Brilliant. Well, is there anybody wanting to comment, ask a question, put something in the chat? I haven't seen anything at the moment. Oh, there's Tony Willis, who chairs the Bannersgate Neighbourhood Forum, the proudest and longest neighbourhood forum standing in the city. I think 15 years, is it, Tony, and still going?
22.
22, there we go. I'm underestimating.
Oh, wow.
Don't forget you were part of Accessible Birmingham.
The question I want to ask you is this. We used to deliver our newsletter to 2,600 houses, but obviously we can't print it at the moment, so we email out. But I prepare on a flexi display book, I prepare these, right? Now, how dangerous is it to give this to the people without the internet? How much of a carrier of the virus is this?
Well, one of the things that we have suggested is that rather than pick things up straight away, is that you leave them overnight so that the virus has a chance to kind of, because so that it can die off, as it were, so that you then don't get contaminated when you pick it up.
Well, I actually sterilize these before I put them out, right? But if I put it to a person who reads it and then passes it to their next door neighbor, and then the neighbor after that, is that a problem?
You know what would possibly be quite helpful? The paper isn't going to kind of keep its the virus won't maintain itself on paper very easily, but the plastic.
It's not it's in plastic.
So, well, then if you get, as long as you give them a wipe, a viral wipe over, that will be helpful. Not the bacterial ones, the ones that kill the virus.
Good. That's good to know. Thank you.
That's great, Tony. I look forward to seeing those newsletters on the street one day. It'll save me having to compose poems every week. You should read them, Marion. They're there. I had a she sent in the last one. You certainly don't want to read that.
I love poetry. I write poetry as well. So that's
I'm not
really
sure you'd appreciate my contributions, but let me move on because there's a question from Judy. Judy does a great job, by the way, in the area around Kyneton, Hazelor Road, Maxstoke, in collecting voluntary contributions for food banks. And she's kept that going for a very long time. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank her for keeping going on that. Judy says, please let us know which priority groups we are now in at the moment with vaccines. And she has a question about carers. If you want to answer the first, Marion, I'll ask Judy if she wants to actually come in on the call.
Okay, so at the moment we're at everybody who has had the opportunity in the first 4 levels And so now that there will be invitations sent out for the next priority group, so 5 onwards, but that will be from the NHS, because they're the ones who are having responsibility for the vaccination programme. That isn't the public health team that are involved in that process.
Okay, Judy, did you want to come back into this? I can see there's a lot of handicraft going on, but I don't want to disturb you in the middle of whatever it is you're creating.
It's fine. Sorry, I am multitasking. I'm weaving at the same time as listening.
Well, there you go.
My question really is to do with unpaid carers. So clearly, December the 30th was the date in which the Joint Vaccine Committee decided that unpaid carers, those looking after relatives, in other words, would move up the list regardless of their age into priority group 6, which some parts of the country are already covering. I'm not suggesting for a moment that this group will be forgotten, but the inconsistency in the way in which the government advice, whether it's local NHS or on the national Gov UK side, it's inconsistent about how that will work, because you need to be able to see that you've got carers allowance, or that you're registered with the GP practice, or registered with a carers support group as a carer. It's not going to be easy. My concern is that we may just get left out again when we're all desperate for respite. And I wonder, so I'm appealing to anyone, let other carers know that this is possible, because it's not, the information isn't out there unless you sign up to Carers UK or similar groups.
Carers Birmingham.
Yeah, carers just don't know that this is available to them in priority group 6, which is nearly upon us.
Did you want to come back on that then, Marianne?
Yes, we have this group has been discussed, and I understand from my NHS colleagues that they are going to make sure that some of the problems that you're highlighting there are taken into account on the local planning and rollout. But I can ask one of my colleagues who works more closely with them to find out, to be able to give you a bit more information on that.
So can I volunteer then to be the conduit for that information back to Vesey Ward via yourself and someone else on your team, Marion?
Yes, certainly. So if you can email me, I will make sure that I link you up with the correct person.
Perfect. And then we'll start disseminating the information out to the Vesey Ward for those carers.
There's one other question in the chat, if I can butt in on this. The vaccination centre in Sutton Town Hall is having 2 or 3 days off, as I understand it. And this is something to do with the volume of the supply of vaccine around the city. Is this right? Do you have any knowledge of that, Marion?
I have heard that there has been some vaccine shortages that have been taking place, and this was mentioned on the NHS call yesterday. So I'm supposing that is the case. What you're saying, Councillor Pocock, it's because of that they haven't got enough vaccine to be able to warrant having the centre being opened over that period, because there won't be anything to jab people with, as it were.
This did come up in the scrutiny committee I chair on Tuesday, so I think there are a number of sites around the West Midlands actually that are getting a bit sporadic in terms of the availability of supply versus the number of people queuing up. I've got to add my compliments to the town hall operation. I went to see it personal use a week or so ago, and it was brilliant and packed full of NHS staff, volunteers, emergency services, first responders. It was a military operation done with great good humour. I even got a biscuit out of it. I'm not sure how I did that, since I'm not sure you're supposed to get food, but somehow I walked away with a penguin. Anyway, we'll close on this item and thank Marion again for all your contributions to us today. I know you're on stand-in duty for Dr. Varney, who's also out tonight on other business. So we appreciate all the hard work that your colleagues
Yes,
are
I'm
doing.
sorry I was a little bit late because there's loads of stuff going on, as you can imagine.
We understand. So thank you for sparing the time and coming in. And we'll have an update at our next meeting. So
yes,
we'll
indeed.
see you soon.
So see you soon, indeed.
Yeah, if we don't
Thanks.
see you
It's
then,
been really nice.
I'll see you at the committee.
Yes, and I've enjoyed joining your ward meeting this evening. It's been very fascinating.
You've learned a bit about medieval woodland management now, haven't you?
It's a pleasure to have you.
My first degree was in biology, and I've learned a bit about that. So yeah, so it was fascinating hearing.
There you go. Oh, we'll come back another time. We'll move on to the next item, and then I'm going to pass after the next item on to Kath, who will then finish off the meeting. But the next item we have scheduled at item 5 on the agenda is to do with planning enforcement. And we're lucky enough to have a council officer with us, David Hill, who is the planning enforcement officer who are principally responsible for the Sutton area. And I've asked Dave to talk about the kind of work he does whenever residents are bothered about a planning development that they think has taken place that shouldn't have taken place, or it's too big, or it's been extended too far, or it hasn't got approval. The person who comes to check if it's legal is David. And I've asked him really just to talk people through how he does his work, because whenever you complain about this, it'll almost certainly end up on David's desk. So, David, do you want to talk us through life as a planning enforcement officer in Sutton Coldfield?
Yes, certainly. Can you hear me?
Yep, it's going well.
It's new to me, this. Anyway, yes, you have a breach of plan. We're all confined really to I administered the Town and Country Plan Act 1990. There's been several planning acts since 1947, when that was the first act in 1947 that made people apply for planning consent. Before that, there was no planning acts. Obviously, to make it worthwhile, they need an enforcement team. So if someone hasn't got planning permission, then that can be sorted out at some day with someone complains. There is a method of complaining. You have to go on the planning website, well, Birmingham City Council website, and then through planning. Today I've sent Councillor Pocock a direct link, and I'll send it to Kath as well, how to get straight into the form itself, where you can actually complain and put down your details of what you're concerned about. Planning deals with two major things, really. Obviously, extensions or development of land and changes of uses of a property. Yeah, they are investigated. The time frame to them, we're supposed to go and investigate. If someone complains and say my neighbour's building an extension, we've got to be out there within I think it's 10 working days. I often try and get out there before that. COVID's made it a bit more difficult because we prefer to have photographs sent in by the person who's complaining as to what he's really concerned about. But I've just took a risk. I mean, Sutton Coldfield's a fairly residential area. You've got you've got back gardens. You can go for the garage. There's no problem with that. But it's hard to say. I mean, I really need to know a specific as to what people are concerned about in many ways, because we investigate it. We have to, but we are constrained sometimes by how someone thinks that a development is wrong, but then at that point we have to make an assessment as to whether we would actually grant planning permission for it. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. The government advice is, if let's say your neighbour's building an extension, we go out and have a look at the extension, and first of all, the first thing we've got to assess is, does it need planning consent, or is it what we call permitted development? In other words, the house extension falls within the permitted development guidelines that the government allows for a person to develop a property without having to apply for formal planning consent. If we find yes, it needs planning consent, we then have to make another assessment. Would it get planning consent if we'd have known about it? Well, the answer to that is many times, yes, okay, we would have given planning consent for it. So we point out to the owner that he should apply for retrospective planning consent. After 28 days, we then check, has a planning application come in? Many times they have. They've actually got a planning agent and submitted the planning application. If they haven't, at that point, we have to make a public interest test as to whether it's whether it's in the public interest, to pursue it to what we call enforcement action or legal proceedings to secure either removal or amendment to that extension. That often leads to people not understanding, because if we think the development's okay and we point it out to the owner who needs planning permission, we then have to go on and then assess it to see it's in the public interest to go and prosecute it. And often it's not, because we would have granted planning consent, we would have known about it. But of course, people look at things in black and white, says, well, you needed planning consent, you've done nothing about it. But the answer is that we have done something about it, but the government advice is that you don't embark on legal action or enforcement action if in the assessment, if your own assessment as a planning officer because usually it's two of us who do this. I refer it to another case, it's another case officer, and they look at it, and we both come to the conclusion that yes, we would give planning consent for it. Then at that point, the owner's told that he's breaking the law, but we aren't going to take it any further. And a lot of complainants don't understand that as principle. If the development is completely unacceptable, it's blocking the light of the neighbour, or it's got a flat roof on it, it's designed wrong, then we will jump to the barricades and take enforcement action. Changes of uses are a bit more difficult, and it's just changed actually. Changing your uses are usually to do with shops. A few months ago, I'd have been explaining to you that, let's say, a greengrocer's shop, let's say a grocer's shop, or what we call an A1 shop, they can change planning permission. They don't need planning permission. So if you've suddenly got a greengrocer's shop and you want to open up as a tobacconist or something like that, then that wouldn't need planning consent. That would have been an A1 use. Then you got A2 use, which is like building societies or banks. And then we got A3, which is a restaurant and cafe. Now, the government in September swept all that away. It now comes under Class E of the what we call changes of uses. And you can change quite happily from a bank into a restaurant without needing planning consent. Or you can turn from a shop into a bank or whatever. And the idea behind it, so as the government says, the high street is struggling. And this is to make things a lot easier for them, so they can change uses fairly easily. I mean, for example, I won't, without naming names, there's one or two in Boldmere Row where we were having problems where they've got planning permission. They've had planning permission for a restaurant and they're not complying with the planning conditions. But if they hadn't, that's under the old system. But if nowadays, if they'd have, let's say this very second in time, it was a bank and it's changed into a restaurant, it wouldn't have needed planning permission, so there'd have been no planning conditions attached, so we wouldn't have been able to take any action against it. It's the government allowing it to just open up the shops, basically, open up the high street and make it less onerous for people to change uses. So there's more uses. I think we'll find the high street will decline in so much as retail, and we'll have more eateries, basically.
And touching on the licensing aspect of things, there's a really big difference between planning and licensing, isn't there, for those?
Without a doubt,
and if you could just spend like a minute just explaining where to go with what type of issue, which belongs to planning and which belongs to licensing.
Well, licensing licenses a premises to sell alcohol between certain hours, but the planning conditions take precedence over it. For example, if we've got let's say a restaurant, a licensed restaurant, and there's a planning condition saying that he's got to close at, he's not to open after 11:30 at night, then he may have a license to sell alcohol till 2 o'clock in the morning, but his planning conditions would take precedence over that. He would have to close at that time, unless he's actually applied for planning consent to extend the hours. But that would be a per se thing. It wouldn't be just for one night. Like in licensing, you can apply for one night or something like that. You've got an event on. But with planning, he'd have to reapply for planning consent to extend his licensing and the hours that we allow that restaurant to be open.
Yeah. That's a perfect example, isn't it, of the nuances of the planning and the licensing departments, and when the issues hit the people on the street, how difficult it is to navigate that. And having you here explaining that is really helpful.
Yeah, well, yeah. As I say, it's always planning conditions attached to a planning application has legal validity, and we can take enforcement action against it, and often do.
one of the reasons I was keen you should be here, is David, is because people very often get confused about which bit of the council does what. They'll just think the council's one body. I keep trying to explain, well, there's different laws that the planning department deal with, other laws that the licensing deal with, and it's two different worlds living in one council. There's a couple of questions in the chat. One is, how does the complainants get kept informed of the proceedings as you go through your investigation? And the other thing I will ask, if you serve an enforcement notice and the occupier doesn't take any notice, what's the next step?
Well, let's start with the last one then, the enforcement notice. At one time, and it's been cleared up now, you serve a planning enforcement notice and you're doing it to remedy a breach of planning control, either someone opening, changing a use without planning permission, or someone's built an extension which they haven't got planning consent, and it's causing demonstrable harm to people. At one time, you served an enforcement notice and there was no right to appeal. So what happened, it ended up in court, and then the court had the very difficult case of deciding what merited a decent planning decision. So in other words, the court was then asked to give it planning permission. That was swept away in 1991, I'm pleased to say. And the reason why it was swept away is that they put an appeal system in. So let's say a person is applying for planning consent to build an extension on his house, which is refused, they can appeal to the independent planning inspectorate. So then the same principle applied to an enforcement notice. If a person has an enforcement notice served on them, either requiring the demolition of an extension or the change, the alteration of a change of use back to what it was, then they have a right to appeal against that enforcement, the provisions of that enforcement or the requirements of that enforcement notice to the independent planning inspectorate. So after the planning inspectors has made a decision, let's say they do exercise that right to appeal and it dismisses their appeal, then they've got nowhere to go planning wise. And so we can then prosecute it in court, and there's no argument in court. They haven't complied with the enforcement notice. The court will not then take on board the planning merits of what they've done. So they can go there and say, it's a wonderful extension, your worships, and all the rest. No, sorry, you haven't got the enforcement notice. Simple as that. Because the courts know that they have a right to appeal below that. And if their exercise has been dismissed, well, that's the end of it, really. The other part of the question.
Yes, how do you keep people informed about what's going on if they've made a complaint?
Makes a complaint and they get an acknowledgement straight away with the reference number of the case and a telephone number of the officer that's dealing with it. We go out on site. We have to make an assessment of what they've actually done. First of all, does it need planning consent? If it does, is it within their permitted development rights? Are we going to accept what they've done? If they've done something without planning consent, are we going to accept it? Is it demonstrably harmful to a neighbour in some way? So we make all these assessments. Then we actually get I put a conclusion to my report, send it off to a planning officer who came to looks at it, and we form an opinion. And at that point, we're either going to take some sort of action. We're either going to close the case because it's not expedient to pursue, in so much as that it didn't need planning consent, it was permitted development, didn't require it. It was under the certain size, or we will take action, and then we inform the complainant at that point that this is the action we're going to take, and then we write to the owner and say, look, this extension you built is totally unacceptable for these reasons, and if you don't move, we are looking to serving an enforcement notice on you. An enforcement notice is a serious thing because if they don't comply with it and they get convicted, it's an unlimited fine. It's costs. If it's a kind of like a HMO, would like to HMO, and they're earning the profit from it, then its proceeds of crime can be added to it, and they also get a criminal record just to add to all that. So it's a serious business. Someone gets an enforcement notice, please take planning advice. Really,
that's a salutary warning to anyone who wants to spread that word about. And I know we get a lot of comments about planning in this ward, so I think that's why I was keen that you came along today to talk about this. If there's any other questions, stick a hand up or stick a comment in the chat. I think there's one that's just arrived, which says, can you extend a current extension and by how much? This is an issue I often get asked, actually. You've got an extension already, can you keep on extending it, or is there a
No,
limit?
an extension of an extension of an extension needs planning permission, no matter what.
But is there a limit to how far you can extend out?
Yeah, under permitted development rights, if you've got a detached property, then you can come out 4 metres and less than 4 metres in height without needing planning consent. If it's a semi-detached property or a terrace property, you can come out 3 metres without requiring planning consent. That's off the rear original of the house. But if it's off an extension, then it needs planning permission.
Excellent. Oh well, it's useful to have 2 professionals in the room, because Becky has just put in the chat a link to the guidance on permitted development rights for householders. Thanks, Becky.
Yeah,
I knew
that's
that
very good, yeah.
you could plug a gap in there somewhere.
I must read it one day.
I'd like to ask a question actually, which,
Go on,
which might be relevant to people. With regards to change of use for a home, either to from an ordinary home to a HMO or other type of business, say care home, elderly care home, mixed use home. How does that work, and has the law recently changed to enable that to happen quicker, sooner?
Yeah, well, it has changed, Kathy, and I haven't quite caught up with it myself. It's changed. It's called the General Permitted Development Order, and it's a statutory instrument by Parliament which allows certain changes of use. They've just altered it totally. In September the 1st, it came in. In Sutton, I don't have much of this problem, but what it used to be is a D1 use, and usually a D1 use covers a number of things, like a doctor's surgery could be turned into a HMO, or a doctor's surgery could be turned into a children's nursery. But I've just had a link because I'm reading about this meeting. I thought, well, I better find myself a bit more, and I've got a link, and I'm going to send it to you, Kathy, as to the general. It's called the General Permitted Development, and it shows you what you can change into. So you can go from, let's say, all under Class E for shops, to alter from, let's say, a hot food shop into a restaurant, from let's say a clothes shop into a bank or whatever. And I'll send that to you. It's quite easy to see. Yeah. But they've changed it considerably, and as I say, the government is allowing. It's allowed. This government, I would say, since 2010, has allowed a lot more in permitted development rights. At one time, when I started work, it was like the total volume of a building, like 50%, not 50%, but 50 cubic metres. You could actually extend on a property without requiring planning consent. It's hard to visualise, but it means how much you come out, how high it is, and they've done away with all that now. It's 3 metres off the back of a property, no matter what. It does affect the next door neighbours, like that's what you're allowed to do. Also, there's a thing called a prior approval, which was brought in 2013. It was only supposed to be temporary for a while, but it still stayed with us. And that is, if you want to build an extension you're allowed to build 3 metres. Let's say it's a semi-detached. You're allowed to build 3 metres anyway. Let's say you want to go up to 6 metres out. Then, if it's between 3 and 6 metres, let's say your extension's 5 metres, then you write to the local authority and have what we call a prior approval application. It goes in, it gets registered. The council write to either neighbour, and if they don't object, then they can build their 5 metre extension without under permitted development rights. So really, that's the first time ever I've ever known that the actual decision as to whether a development's allowed is actually passed to the neighbour as to whether, because if they object, then that person, if he still wants his 5 metre extension, then has to apply for planning consent.
I've actually had that happen to me. Yes.
Let's hope Mr. Hill wasn't involved in that one.
Because if someone does a 4 metre extension off the back, it can affect the light quite considerably the next door neighbour, you know.
Yeah.
Well, we know where to come to for advice. I want to say thanks, David. You've been working in this line of business for quite a number of years now for the city.
Yeah, well, I've been in the council. I mean, it's ridiculous how long I've been working for the council. I started on the 5th of August 1968, which is ridiculous time. No,
God, yeah, I was still at school.
You were born, Rob, I think.
I was 12, 14.
Yeah. Anyway, that's when I started, and anyway, they sent me off to see the Queen the other day, not the other year, just to kind of celebrate 50 years in the council. Really. So
okay. that helps you get a gold watch before when you go. But I did want to thank you for that. There's
I don't think about. Oh, go on, you carry on, sorry.
I just wanted to make a point that you get a lot of ear bending as a council officer, and planning in particular, both enforcement and planning applications. You get rough treatment from members of the public. That must be really tough. But I've got to say, and I've seen some emails, I've been copied into some emails quite recently actually, sent to Mr. Hill, the language in which I'm surprised they came through the filter system. So you get a lot of abuse from the public. And
it's important to
ride it out with a sense of humour, David. So I'd like to thank you for that.
Yeah, well, planning is important to people. I mean, and they get very, how can one say, very uptight about it. The complainants, certainly. I mean, I've been to places where I've got out the car and the complainant's been standing there waiting for me, and they say one of them I remember quite recently was a woman, and she was using bad language before he got out the car, and the husband was trying to stop, and then they both fell down the foundations of this extension, you know. So
I'd like to see one day the confessions of a planning enforcement officer.
No, you'd pay to do my job sometimes, because as a judge says, there's no queerer than folk, and there's no queerer than people who want to complain about planning.
But anyway, I really appreciated your time today, so thanks very much for that. And
well,
also, don't forget
for having me. I hope I did okay. You take care.
Done a great job, and I appreciate you. Probably your debut performance on Teams Live, is it?
Pretty well, it is. Yeah. Well, I've had meetings with colleagues, but that's what I do miss. Because I'd know more about changing your uses if I was talking to colleagues than I do if I have to sit down and read the General Permitted Development Order 2020, you know. I'd say, oh, does that need planning consent? So, you know, that's what I miss totally, really, is talking to colleagues. But let's hope that won't last forever.
Well, for members of the public watching, Becky has done a great job of sticking some more reading in the chat. So for anyone else who wants to go onto the planning portal, you can read the link that Becky has sent through. I'm going to wind up for now. This is the end of my part of the meeting. Kathy's going to take over for the next item on the agenda. So thanks a lot, David. I'll see you with another session. And that's all for me. So I'm now going to hand over to Kath, who's going to take us through the remaining items on today's agenda.
Okay, so next item on the agenda is social care support for the over 50s. Miriam Aslam, the manager of Sutton Neighbourhood Network Scheme, apologises for being unavailable today to give an update to everybody. But just to let you know what Age Concern have been up to, the Christmas shoebox appeal, they gathered 75 boxes filled with gifts and messages of goodwill, and they were sent out to isolated residents across Sutton Coldfield. So congratulations to everybody involved in that. That's a really marvellous thing to do. Over the next few months, the team will be expanding with the recruitment of a digital inclusion officer, meaning that they're going to extend the support for inclusive digital accessing barriers to digital inclusion and digital resources. So that's going to be taking up quite a good space out there for everybody. The Emergency Food Assistance and Essential Supplies Grant that aims to support vulnerable citizens who are struggling to afford food and other essentials due to COVID. The grants are up to £5,000 and they are still available up until the end of March. So for any non-profit organisation that wishes to apply for this money to deliver out to vulnerable people in the community, you can still apply for that, but under the following four outcomes. So you need to deliver social support, or volunteers for essential supplies for food and shopping, support with the food bank and food and enhanced information, advice and guidance offer. So if any of those meet what you want to deliver, you can apply for those grants. But bear in mind, it's the 18th of February now and it's open until the end of March. So get cracking. Their standard grants award still remains available as well and continues to be a success, and they have given out over £70,000 into the community over the last 6 months. So that's quite phenomenal, isn't it, considering we've been in lockdown and that community groups and vulnerable people are accessing that level of grant to help them through this terrible time. One other thing that you need to be aware of with the neighbourhood network scheme itself is that it's no longer going to be only aimed at the over 50s, which was always its remit. So it's been such a success that now it's going to be delivered to all age ranges across the remit. So be prepared for some further news and more information around that as we get it going into the future. Does anyone have any questions that perhaps I could answer regarding the neighbourhood network scheme? Nothing.
Can't say anything.
That's great.
That's quieting people down.
Yeah, so that's lovely to get an update from Miriam. The next item on the agenda is the future of the Carpenters Arms, our inaugural home for our Vesey Ward meetings. And we'd like to welcome Father Alan Morris, whose timing is absolutely impeccable, because I know you weren't on the call about 2 minutes ago. So thank you for joining us with absolute impeccable timing. Father Alan is going to give us an update on what's happening with the Carpenters Arms and the future for the venue that is so close to all of our hearts, that we all know so well. So may I hand over to you, Father Alan?
Certainly you may. I was here actually, but I was down not as a presenter, so I was hidden in the midst. Oh. It might be helpful just to give a little bit of background to the Carpenters Arms. It was our parish's second church, replacing the first. We outgrew it in the 1950s, moved into our present premises for a church on Jockey Road, and the old church became a parish centre. By the 1990s, it wasn't in good repair, and the management of it seemed beyond the capacity of the parish at that time. So it was put on a 50-year lease and let to the Sutton Central Churches Trust for use as a community centre for the first 25 years of the lease on a peppercorn rent to allow the trust to do some repair and renovation work and so on. And they did a great job, but increasingly found it difficult to operate according to their trust deeds, especially with regard to providing trustees. So the last year, with COVID being perhaps the straw that broke the camel's back, they relinquished the lease and returned it to the parish. Not the best of times for us to receive it back and think what we were going to do, but we're trying to rise to the challenge. Had times been more normal, we'd have embarked on a process of consultation earlier, but we are where we are and are only beginning that nearly 6 months after taking possession of the property again. We received the property back and we inherited Kay O'Keefe as hall manager. She's about as nice an inheritance as you can possibly get. So we've taken responsibility for her and the building. COVID has meant that many of our usual activities, at least over much of the past 6 months, has had to be suspended, although a few things have been able to continue. I think it's fair to say that over the past few years, although well managed and maintained, the centre's just been ticking over and not being put to the fullest use either by the parish or by the wider community, but it's been a valued resource for those who've been making use of it for health things, social things and so on. I'm sure it can become a much better resource, and that's our project as a parish for the next 12 months, to consult and consider how to open things up, to raise its profile, make it clearer what it's for, make it a still more attractive place for all of those who want to use it, all of those who visit it. A few little things just to make comment on. Some short-term improvements too. There's some relatively minor repair work we need to do and some upgrading to make the entrance from Boldmere Road more attractive. Some plantings in the car park there and probably changing the gate and fence. I don't think we need planning permission for any of that, fortunately. Changing the gate and the fence to make it look a little less like a barricade. and then improving access from the other side from our church car park and so on. We're going to change the name. The Carpenters Arms sounds like a pub and doesn't really describe to very many people what the place is. So we had a consultation in the parish and have come up with a new name, which is the Newman Community Centre. John Henry Newman was a famous 19th century Catholic, beatified by Pope Benedict when he came to Birmingham in 2010, canonized more recently by Pope Francis. Newman used to live just down the road in Maryvale, came to our old parish to celebrate Mass. So it was thought appropriate to commemorate that historical link and incorporate his name into the revamped venture. We don't want the halls to be parish halls, so even parish halls let out for occasional community use. So we want to make that clear in the title too. So the planned new name is Newman Community Centre, with the name indicating it's Catholic association, but the function being intended to be much more than parochial. So that's pretty much where we are now. From April onwards, we're going to have a series of meetings exploring the possibilities regarding the centre and how it can serve our community, our parish community and the wider Boldmere community. The plan is for a series of open meetings with speakers, plan to get people thinking and talking, as many voices as possible, feeding into the reflection and the decision making that'll follow. So we have an eminent first speaker lined up. Rob has agreed to come and talk something around the lines of community cohesion, to get us off thinking broadly about things, not narrowly. We're hoping to get, for another evening, people associated with a variety of community centres to talk about the vision that they work with and the impact that the community centres have on the broader communities. We've had some contact with groups that are doing interesting work with people with Alzheimer's and carers for people with Alzheimer's. Possibly going to do something around community organising, looking at different models for youth work. A youth group we will probably be starting based on the Sutton Caulfield Adventure Unit, and maybe something for young adults, something like making a difference, giving the opportunity to come together for some sort of social engagement, but also being a base for people who want to get involved in social enterprise one way or another. We've had a suggestion of having a drop-in free lunch centre, especially for the marginalised. So those sort of things being considered, and then doing some online consultation through whatever social media outlets we can access, so as to give still more people opportunities of sharing their thoughts about where we might go. So that's where we are at the moment. People have any comments or questions, I'd be really happy to receive them, and particularly if people have can recommend any useful social media outlets that we can pump this stuff out so as to hear other people's views.
Okay, that's amazing. So potted history there alongside the future plans for the Newman Community Centre, previously known as the Carpenters Arms. Yeah. It's quite exciting to be invited to comment and input into that, Father Alan. So thank you very much for that. We have one person who's popped their hand up to ask a question. John Mole, would you like to...
Thank you, Councillor.
There you go.
I've lost my face. There we go. I think I've made that. Please note I've actually got a shirt on now as well.
Oh, well done. It's just been gone and changed, doesn't it?
I think the whole development sounds really, really exciting, and I have got some certain skills in actually capacity building, community groups, third sector, and bringing in external funding. So if you need me, I'm certainly available.
That's wonderful. Thank you so
I had
much.
a funny feeling John was going to offer his support at that moment, and that's completely appropriate and completely the right person to be speaking to. John performs, pardon the pun, not intended, miracles in the community. So, you know, he's a real asset for us in our ward. So we'll pop that together. Does anyone else have any questions or comments or ideas perhaps to for the future use of the Carpenters Arms? I mean, personally, why people are thinking about that, I'm very keen on young adults and support that they require in the community. My children, myself, are heading into young adulthood and transitioning into adulthood, and I think that transitioning into adulthood for all types of individuals, be they, you know, ordinary members of the community, people with additional needs, people with accessibility issues, they need to be catered for as well. So it's a really important area, and something that Rob and I both work on in the City Council ourselves on that. So it might be a perfect opportunity to sort of line some thinking up as well. I have another hand up. TW Tony Willis. Off you go, Tony.
Oh, hello. I produce a newsletter, and it's basically it's for Banners Gate. But Banners Gate is a dormitory area, and if you're going to be putting on regular stuff in this new hall, this newly named hall, then I'm prepared to have a space on our newsletter for you to advertise it.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you.
And if I give you a bit of a history about it, it started off with one sheet like this. Can you see that? That was September.
Hey, 97.
And this is the latest one. It's 40 pages of stuff, and it's free if you email Gatepost to this address, thegatepost@gmail.com, and you get it every month for nothing.
And this month you get a really nice book review from local councillor Kat Scott.
There she is on the front.
I thoroughly enjoyed doing that book review.
There's a few sales reps on this call, I can tell that.
Oh, we have a question here actually saying, are you seeking new trustees? Very good point.
Yep. We don't know what the management structure is going to be until we have a clearer idea of what we're going to be doing and how we're going to be operating. We don't need to have trustees because it'll operate under the aegis of the parish. But I personally would hope that we will have, whatever the management structure is, that we will have members of the broader community as part of that management group. But it's most unlikely, unless we decide to hive it off as a separate charity, which seems likely to just complicate things. It's unlikely that we will need trustees, but I'm sure we will welcome any support in terms of management responsibilities.
Fabulous. Okay, so thank you very much. It's been a completely enlightening, and the next item on the agenda is, if you stay to have a listen to that, you'll meet some more of our community leaders and of our local community groups, who hopefully will give us a quick update on what they've been up to. And
looks like Ray's arrived just in time.
Looks like Ray's arrived just in time. I'll tell you, the stars are aligning for me today. So let's move on. Thank you very much, Father Alan. That was really, really lovely. And to have something to look forward to in the future for people, something to grasp hold of, a project to take forward, is really, really motivating and what we need at the moment. So thank you for that. So item 8, community updates, residents groups, forums, town council, etc. So I'm going to start by bringing in Steve Line, if you're here, from Eco Sutton. Are you online, and do you wish to pop on and give us an update?
I can't see him on there, Cass.
See him either, no.
Steve Lyne is the chair, I think, of Eco Sutton, and he did email us to say he would like to make a contribution to
and normally we get
meeting.
a lovely update from Eco Sutton. So let's move on to, let's say, Ray Beach. Ray, have you got an update on what you've been up to recently?
Well, not very much of one. Can you hear me okay?
You're a bit muffled. Are you underground?
No, I'm in my little office. I'll open up the camera properly.
There you are.
There we go.
Welcome.
Not a lot going at the moment. We're preparing the newsletter part of the new Vesey pages, which a lot of you will know is now taking over from Boldmere pages. Bigger, enlarged, it will reach all of our area, all of Vesey Ward, rather than just the Boldmere bit. We're getting together that. We're also going to try and reopen, because we lost some of the names and people haven't updated, our email listing so that we can send out notices that we receive from yourselves at times, from the police and from various other departments. So if there's anybody listening at the moment that would like to sign up to our mailing list again, everything blind copy, so we don't share anything, and nothing's for sale to anybody else. boldmere.forum@talktalk.net if anybody's interested in joining. And there's not a lot going on because we can't organise an AGM, which should be due at the end of April. So that's still in abeyance until we know what's going on.
Okay, so I've popped up the details, boldmere.forum@talktalk.net.
Okay. Sorry I was away a bit. I was also booked to listen to Dr. Mike Hodder on Zoe's webinar. So I've listened to some of that and come back to you just in time.
Perfect timing.
There's no need to subscribe to Netflix. We can give you local entertainment.
Do our best.
Netflix, this was Archaeology of Sutton, organised by Folio.
Just a question, if I can, to John Mole, referencing Ray's point about AGMs. We've got quite a lot of active forums in our ward, but obviously the process of getting your annual meeting done is pretty difficult now, John. So are you able to tell us all about what are the rules about keeping AGMs going?
AGMs for the city council is a very simple one. Obviously, we're going to be as sympathetic as is physically possible, and we are certainly not going to be enforcing any AGMs from there. From both a charitable perspective and Companies House, right now, I think all the big agencies are aware there is a pandemic out there, and they are not enforcing the normal legislative rules and regulations that go there. And I think if any agency did, to be truthful, they should be run out of town at this time in the crisis.
Yeah, I'm still not muted, and I can say that we're dealing with somebody from the City Council named Andrew Perry. It's been extremely helpful, and we've had our grant through. We've explained that we had to cancel last year's AGM, and we're getting the full support that we need.
Yeah, Andrew's actually one of our team, councillor, and again, we'll do everything we can to support all the agencies that are out there right now.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Lovely. Is there anyone else out there? It's so difficult when you're not in the room to see who is here. So do we have Friends of Boldmere Gates? Becky, do you want to give an update on the Friends of Boldmere Gate? I know you touched on it earlier about the car park, but is there anything else you've been up to recently that you want to let the community know about? No.
She's on mute.
Oh, here she is. There you go.
Hi. So the only thing to update you really is that one of our members, Francis, has done a detailed survey in relation to disability within the community and access to the park. So that's one of the things we'll be talking about in our meeting in a couple of days. And obviously Rob Pocock will, I believe, is attending. Thank you, Rob.
You missed.
So So yeah, the only other thing that I think that we were talking to Rob about was the petition for the improved crossing to access Boltmere Gate as well. So Rob was saying that there'd been some progress on the town council receiving petitions. So that's really positive news as well. But if you're interested in joining us, please do not hesitate to get in touch with Rob, and we'll happily invite you to our Zoom meeting, which I think is on Monday or Tuesday next week.
Perfect.
If you want to put your email address in the chat, Becky, then people could email it in. Just on the question of that crossing, we had a petition on this. In fact, Manish is on the call, took the lead on getting a petition together to put in to the town council to fund a pedestrian crossing across Monmouth Drive as you get into Boldmere Gate across Stonehouse Road junction. We hit a bit of an obstacle because there wasn't a procedure for the town council, which is fairly new, to submit petitions, but they have just amended the rules to allow petitions now. So the one we've got going on the car park in Boldmere Gate to encourage the town council to support that is going to go in next Wednesday, Tuesday, I think it is. Manish is putting that in, and then next time round the one to do with the crossing ought to go in. Thank you. Yes, it is Tuesday, and that going in March. The highways engineers have to, for the city council, have to assess whether or not it's practical to put a crossing in. And getting ahead of the game, Carl Randall, the highways officer for Sutton and Erdington, has done a preliminary assessment on this and thinks it's a practical scheme. He's done an outline costing. So it's really a question now of trying to negotiate with the town council on the funding. And it would be great, actually, if we could get that crossing in prior to the Commonwealth Games, and we could get the car parking in as well. Obviously, that then encourages a flow of pedestrians into the park as well as a flow of vehicles. So hopefully that will get through the town council's procedures in the next month or so. Manish is on the call, but I think he's either cooking the tea, eating the tea, or looking after the kids. So I can't remember which.
Well, if we bring Manish in a moment,
he's not live unless he puts his hand up.
Yeah.
You've got a couple of others.
I've got a couple of other people who've got questions to make, but I wanted to reiterate the point that Becky made about Frances Hayward and all the work that she's been doing in the background. Frances and I have been speaking about this and best ways to get everybody's opinion, and she has worked really hard on the survey to try and open up Sutton Park to make it more accessibility friendly, and I'd just like to congratulate her on all the work that she's been doing, because she's an absolute star, and we wouldn't be anywhere if it wasn't for you, Frances. So I'm not sure if you're on the call, but thank you very much for that hard work that you've been doing. So next in line to ask a question, it was Tony Willis.
I think Ray was in there as well.
Ray after Tony. Yep.
Oh, thanks, Kath. It's just that I want to say that we're doing 40 pages a month on Gatepost. It's amazing. We don't have too much trouble filling it, but if anyone's listening who has anything of interest that they think might be of interest to all the residents in Boldmere and Bannersgate, please let me have it. And the easiest way to send it to me is send an email to bgatepost@gmail.com with email Gatepost in the subject line, and I'll send it to you every month. Okay, thanks very much. That's all I want to say.
Okay, I'm just typing that into the chat. Email Gatepost in the subject line. There you go. bgatepost@gmail.com if you want to have anything input into Tony Willis's Bannersgate newsletter. There we go. That's going up into thing. So is there anybody else out there?
Ray had his hand up a bit earlier.
Yeah, Ray, and then Manish, if he's actually live with us at the moment.
He might be live, but whether he's presenting.
I think he's alive, but he might not be on the call.
An item I've been asked in the last few days by two different residents that, as far as I know, aren't known to each other. It's a response to this notice from Keir about trees being chopped down. because of disease. There's 3 going or gone in Redacre Road. People want to know when they're going to be replaced. And also, is there any plan to replace the ones that were taken down either during the Amy period or when it was the City Council doing it before then? There's a lot of empty spaces, and I don't know, people just want to see some greenery back.
Yeah, there is a policy within the council to replace all trees that are removed with brand new ones, and generally it takes a little bit of time because there's some kind of ground settlement that needs to happen before they can plant the trees, and then there's also a schedule in place. Rob, you might have more detail than me on the schedule, but it all takes time to sort of like come to fruition, if it were. But I can get further details for sure from Kia.
Just following up on that, then.
As a forum, we'd be very happy to go round and note where trees used to be and put it on a list for you if you could take it up. There's no
take you up on that offer, Ray. Yep.
There's no problem with settlement on those trees because they're pre-Amy times.
I think if I can step in on this one, there's 3 things going on here. So if a tree is diseased, it gets taken out, they grind out the stump, and then they do leave the ground to settle for about 9 months. So normally they'll take a tree out around about now, but it won't be till the autumn before they put a new one in. But they should do it within a 12-month period. But obviously, planting trees you can only do in the kind of late autumn to early spring. You can't put them in the summer, otherwise they just die. So there's a cycle in the year that is scheduled by Kia now for the removals, and a cycle in the year for the replacements, and we should be able to get hold of that. I have had a spreadsheet in the past with a kind of list of all of these, so let's see if we can get the tree man. His name is Nick Barton, by the way. Nick Barton is the one to go for. The other question, the more imaginative idea it raised, to go back to the days of pre-Amy, and you're going back probably 15 years now, trees did come out and weren't replaced. And there is City Council have now adopted this plan of, I can't remember what it's, 1 million trees in Birmingham or something. There's a big plan to restore a tree canopy in the city, across the city. And one element of this may well be to try to go back to having street trees. Not everybody likes street trees. We get emails for saying, can you get rid of this tree? It's blocking me light, dumping leaves over my garden. Not everybody likes trees. But in principle, the idea of having trees is a good one. I'm going to call in Jane on this in a minute. So the restoration of a tree canopy across the city could well involve, with agreement with residents, a replanting. So your little audit, Ray, I think would be brilliant, be useful, road by road.
Definitely.
We'll start with the area where I deliver your leaflets. Yeah. And we'll put it in. And I think the residents need to be asked whether they've got any objections to one.
Exactly that, yeah.
Back outside. But in general, the other problem with the old trees, there's one opposite my house here. When they've resurfaced Redacre Road, they've actually taken the curbstones out, and the tree now is forming part of the curb.
Yeah.
And the one that was right outside my house was a sycamore, and I was very glad to see that gone.
Yeah, yeah.
The sycamore were blocking all the gutters up.
I've been with Kia on some of their assessments of trees, etc., on particular roads where they've looked like an issue. So we can get them to specifically go down to that road, which I know I won't say what road it is, and we'll look at that if you wish.
They do have a set of rules about removing trees. Disease is
They're
one.
Not allowed to remove them. You can't apply to get one removed unless it's a danger.
There is a grounds called outgrown its location. That's one of the reasons they can justify. So the ones you're talking about, Ray, which spill into the road, there are a few around in our ward. I think Darnick Road, a couple of cases where the trees just push the pavement into the road. They can legitimately replace those if they are.
We're not looking to replace it. It's a mature tree. What I'm saying is that it was pushing the curbstones out. They've removed the curbstones, and now the tree forms part of the curb. It's not a problem anymore. They've done a great job.
Oh, right, okay.
Congratulate Kia with the resurfacing in Redacre Road. They've done a great job.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that, Ray,
good,
because
yeah.
we often do a little evaluation form, a reply form. So I'm trying to make sure one gets down your road. Did Jane Bennett has...
My neighbours reckon that I'm in cahoots with you and Kath. How do you manage that, they said.
I get the same thing because my
We're
bins
here
get
to
empty.
represent our residents, that's all.
I always get the,
Kath, don't worry.
the dustbins get emptied regularly on a Wednesday in the road I live in, and I always say that the Wednesday round is more reliable than Mondays and Tuesdays. I don't claim any responsibility for that. Can we call in Jane, Kath? Because now Jane
yeah.
knows a lot about trees.
Yep. Jane Bennett.
I know a lot about trees, but no, we did plant about 16 saplings, which we got free from the Woodland Trust as part of their campaign to plant, millions of trees in Britain. And we know, there's an awful lot of trees that are coming to maturity now. People are having them chopped down. We've lost the green finches from our garden because the fir trees are going, they get too big. People want them chopped down. That's fine. I understand that. But I was, a couple of years ago now, I think I was looking for little pieces of green areas in Sutton where potentially we could plant more trees. I have a beach, somebody's got a beech tree now at the moment, said, Jane, would you like it? Well, my garden isn't big enough for it, but I have identified a green area in Teddington Close, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And
I've
contacted Western Paz, see if it belongs to them, and it doesn't belong to them. And I just think it's a piece of grass, which doesn't seem to be in front of anybody's property. There's a wall one side and then a wide path and a house wall the other side of the path. And I just think it would be lovely if we could green up Sutton even more than it is, because we are losing our trees in the gardens because of development and because of, as I say, some of the trees are too big now for some of the gardens. So I was just wondering if anybody point me in the right direction, if they've got any. Sorry, go on.
There's a couple of things that we can do. We can see what parts of the ward belong to the city council and our green spaces and our potential places for adding additional trees to. That's something we can do relatively easily, but we need to speak to parks, etc., about managing.
I think it's a great site. Thinking about the location, Teddington, it would be part of that is city council grounds maintenance, so it will be city land. Some of it near the flats, I think, belongs to the managing agent of the flats, which also they've got a nice grassy area there. So maybe a joint scheme which deals with the city council side in the little passageway area, and then the grass frontage in close proximity to the flats.
I think it needs a lot more further thought, and we should have a little catch up around it. I've got quite a large garden that could do with an extra tree, so if you've got a spare one, I'm more than happy to take it off your hands.
It costs £1,000 to buy a tree from Amy. I don't know whether it's the same from Keir. Jane, do you want to send an email to Kath and I just to put that on a formal basis? Sure. Can we explore the feasibility, and then we can progress that? We can forward that on and look at that option.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's great.
Do we have any more community groups that wish to say a few words? Did we have Steve Lyon on the line from Eco Sutton?
I'm just scanning and it doesn't look like he's come in.
Okay, no problem. So I guess it's time to move on to item 9, Commonwealth Games.
I think we've got I think you're on another agenda there, Kath.
We've done
the Commonwealth Games.
Oh, we did that earlier, didn't we? Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You've got any other urgent business?
Any other urgent business? For anybody out there? Anything from you, Rob?
No, I always talk about rubbish, but I think the bins collections fell over when the snow came along, and we were just about doing a catch-up on the Tuesday rounds in particular. And I know a resident who's often on these calls in Sunnybank Road has had his Tuesday bin missed on the recycling. But
I'm a victim of that one too.
Oh, yeah, right, okay.
But they've all been, it's all been.
There is a change of management in the depot. the previous manager, Richard Smith, has gone over to help Redfern Road, I think it is, on the south side of the city. So there might be a few hiccups over the next few weeks, but hopefully they're back in action again. While we're on to new officers in the area, Kath and I were advised that we now have a new police sergeant. Yes. We had Adrian Cox, and he lasted 6 months, I think, before he was moved somewhere else, promoted, I think. So we now have Harjinder Singh. I think she's just taken on our area as a permanent sergeant. She's emailed Kath and I to have a chat, and I think she said, I'm just getting to learn this virtual technology, Teams and whatever. So hopefully at our next meeting, which we would expect to have in April, we can get Harjinder to talk about the latest initiatives on neighbourhood policing. In particular, I know Kath is a great fan of this, that we're going to restart as soon as we're allowed to meet human beings, meet other human beings. The street watches and speed watches can resume. They've had to be suspended for all the time of the pandemic, of course.
I'm on most of those. I'm on those forums as well, and I think people are really missing going out there and having that social interaction. So getting those back up and running is going to be an absolute godsend.
Yeah, and I've just got to say, Satpal, who's our PCSO, who used to look after these, is still on duty, but he caught COVID, so he has been off. Yeah, it's COVID.
Bless Satpal.
Infection, so he's been off recovering from that, but hopefully he's coming back. Yes. I see Ray's got his hand up.
Ray? You're on mute, Ray.
That's better. Yeah. Interaction with the police at all. It's 12 months, I think, since I saw Ian Willits. Is he still with us?
Oh, well, that's a good question. Kath might know more about Ian Willits than I do.
I think there is an element of sick leave involved. And that's all I know.
Oh, okay.
So I think, through COVID, through everything else, and some health issues, which I won't go into, I think his hours have just reduced. That's why we haven't seen a lot of Ian. That is not to say that he's not still on the team, because he is. It's just, I think we're just seeing less of him for a really good reason.
He's another one that promised to put articles in our newsletter that never materialised.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've seen Miriam Aslam here from Age Concern, have I, tonight?
No, she couldn't make it. She had family.
I've emailed her. She said she wanted to put something in. I've emailed her. The deadline is approaching rapidly for the March-April edition. And
you could forward,
I will forward her update to you so that you can create something for me. And actually, there is another update which I've completely been remiss about that I need to let everyone know about. It's the bike donation scheme. So it's called the Bike Project, and these guys are looking for help to what they do is they donate reconditioned second-hand bikes to refugees who are required to live on a very small amount of money. So if you can help anyone at all, if you've got spare bikes that you would happily donate, I'll put the details up so that you can see that, and I'll also put them on our Facebook page as well, so you can see that too.
Kath, there's something to put in the newsletter then as well.
Yeah, I'll whiz that over to you. Let me just put the details in the chat for everybody.
That anybody's mentioned while I was away, I noticed that there's bikes by Banners Gate entrance now for use of residents.
That's right. It's a bike hire scheme. It's part of the West Midlands Travel for West Midlands. They're bringing in bike hire, and I think there's several locations.
What I'm meaning is that all these items could go into our newsletter.
Yeah, no, it's good.
The gatepost one and the wider one for the Vesey area. But unless we know some details, there's not a lot we can do about it, is there?
I'll whiz them on to you, Ray, no problem.
I'll be very grateful, Kath. We want to keep pages up.
So on one final note that I would just like to say to people, that is if you're doing homeschooling at all and you need any help or support, if you want any help or support for your children's mental health, it was Mental Health Awareness Week last week, and if you are struggling with technology, you haven't got the right access to get onto online lessons, etc., please get in touch with me, because there's support out there available for you and your family, and I'd like to help you very much get in touch with that. So just email me at kath.scott@birmingham.gov.uk. Okay, and that's my final note. The next meeting, the date hasn't been arranged yet.
Probably in a couple of months.
Couple of months' time. Ray, have you got one more?
Yes, it's a bit of publicity actually.
Go on.
My son has been working from home, and because of the school closures, he's had his twin boys with him, 9 years old, and the computer went down. And I've scrounged another one from a friend of mine that was a bit dodgy, and Boldmere Computers have done a brilliant job of getting them up and running and learning again. Although obviously it's half term this week, but they've pulled out all the stops and got them back online again very quickly.
That's brilliant.
So just wanted to add a bit of praise for community spirit.
Well, thank you to Boldmere Computers for sort of helping out the children of local children with their educational needs. That's really generous of you, and I'm sure the parents were eternally grateful. So thanks for highlighting that for us, Ray. So that leaves us to end the meeting. Thank you very much to everybody who's listened in, joined in, asked questions, popped their hand up, left the cameras off, and left their buttons on mute, because it's run very, very smoothly. And any questions for the future, just give us an email.
Yep, thank you very much, everyone.
We'll say
We've
goodnight.
enjoyed the show as always.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks very much all.
Bye.
We'll see you again soon.